Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Love, Life and Disability with me, Kay Ashton. I'm a white woman with brown hair and blue eyes. I'm currently sat in my office and I've got my Zoom background behind me, which is a bit purpley in colour, and it says Love, Life, Disability. It's there to drown out the mess of musical instruments that I don't know how to play, so I don't want to lead any of you on. Today, I'm joined by Shari. How are you doing, Shari?
Fine. Thank you for inviting me. I am a white woman with hair that is blonde, but I wasn't born like that, with eyes that are less brown. And I guess I used to be really young as well. And I thought that those were my identity. Little did I know. So I am continuing in this body, in this world, with a whole lot of love. And behind me, I have a light all lit up and it says love.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you on today's show, and all the way from across the pond. And everybody knows me. I love across the pond. So thank you for joining.
Oh, what a thrill.
So I've been reading about some of the work that you've been doing, and I thought it'd be great for you to come and talk to my listeners today about the work in relational mindfulness and why it's been such a key success in communication strategy.
You know, we all know about mindfulness and yoga, meditation, and all of these practices that are focused on ourselves, which are very powerful and really important, because you can't really have a healthy relationship until you have one with yourself. But it's very hard to find ways to use this understanding of ourselves in our relationships. So relational mindfulness is really about learning the tools to, first of all, when you're listening, to put yourself aside so that you can understand the story as well as possible from the other person's perspective. And it's really interesting. We all have knee-jerk reactions and biases, and it doesn't necessarily mean we're a bad person. Humans are designed to be able to react quickly. But there are times where we make an assumption about someone, either by the way they look, the way they sound, or other factors. And if we're lucky enough to be corrected in our experience or what we're learning from the other person, we realize I never would have had this ability to get beyond my knee-jerk reaction and see there's human similarities which allow us to appreciate the differences.
And I think that's so important, because at the end of the day, we're all very unique. Our fingerprints are unique to us. And even though we may feel we're similar, we've all had different upbringings and come from different places and had different life experiences in which all need to be appreciated. And our unconscious bias can, rightly or wrongly, take us down a path which is a bit risky, and as you say, sometimes be quick to judge, or sometimes using incorrect language. Like sometimes people may say in the disability world that somebody might be wheelchair bound or confined to a wheelchair, when actually it's the wheelchair that gives you that sense of movement, that being able to live your life and really help you out. And where we may judge people, especially on what you say about what people may wear. There's been so many times when I've been growing up and people think I'm a chav or a scally. Now, in the UK, that basically means a bad person, point it blunt, somebody that's going to get up to mischief and probably hangs about with the wrong people. When actually, no, that's just what I feel comfortable in. Like being able to dress comfortable enables me to do my best piece of work because I'm comfy. But people might judge me and then judge my background on where I am from. And if you compare me to my parents, they're quite smartly dressed, as is my brother. But then you'll see me, I'm in sportswear, trackies, trainers, and people are a bit like, not too sure, but they will judge.
I think it's so important. And this issue came up for me the other day when someone invited me to something and said that this was the dress that you had to wear. And I just had such an emotional reaction to it. Are you kidding me? when's the last time somebody invited me to anything and told me I had to wear, to me, it felt like a uniform.
Mhm.
And so it really gave me an opportunity to realize that there are so many little things like this that happen every day, in which, whether it's an ad, whether it's a person or an inference that suggests that in order to be acceptable, you have to conform to someone else's standard. And you can get along with people in some circumstances like that, but how can you possibly be known if you're not yourself?
Mhm.
And how can you possibly be loved if you're not known?
And the other thing as well, where you're speaking about the dressing and being told what to wear, I've seen it across industries where if you're on a hiring panel, a lot of the time people will hire in their own skin. They hire for people that they can relate to. And
Yeah.
therefore, if you're doing that, you're not going to be able to change and reflect society, whether or not that's in the UK to reflect the UK demographic or in the
Mhm.
States. And it happens so much. And if we do that, we're not being inclusive towards others. And then it's going to be the same ideas because it's the same upbringing, it's the same lifestyles, and nothing will change. And you'll just keep reinventing the same wheel. And the same problems will keep persisting.
Can't say any more about that than yes. I mean, our country, oh my gosh, we have really been through some de-evolution that I never expected.
And we touched upon there about obviously like coming from like diverse backgrounds, is when you are coming from a diverse background, we sometimes are subject to a lot of negativity and connotation. But with the mindfulness and that relationship with ourselves, how can we combat these negative messages? So for myself, I always try and do, it's like a circle. So I'll put everything that I can control in the middle, and then it's anything that I can't control, but I might be able to influence goes around the side. Otherwise, we can just beat ourselves up. But what kind of relationship mindfulness would you be recommending?
It's a great question. I think the first thing is to try and have an exquisite awareness of what's going on inside of you, your feelings, your thoughts, the people around you, and the environment. When you are reading the room, it is a lot easier to relate to people. So it doesn't require that you behave in a particular way. I think trading ourselves for what we imagine is wanted is always dangerous. But in other words, let's say somebody shakes your hand and they say, "How are you?" And you start talking about yourself, and all of a sudden they start bleeding. It's probably a good idea to not continue with what you were talking about and to notice that they are experiencing something. Well, we can get cues from sounds, body language, feeling. People who are deaf can feel music or
Mhm.
feel the impact of bodies moving. Whatever it is that enables you to read others is absolutely essential to having a good mutual relationship. And when we allow ourselves, through putting ourselves aside, to really be present and to be like antenna for other people's experience, we are both enriched. This is what we were built for. We were hardwired to connect in very deep ways. And we see this connection in fMRI scans, where when we're listening to someone else's story, both our brains light up in the same place. And the reason that we were hardwired for this is because without this communication, we couldn't build a culture. We couldn't come to agreements like don't cross the street until the light turns green, or obviously bigger, more important issues. So relational mindfulness is really about first being aware of yourself and your feelings. And if you don't feel safe talking about something, don't. You always have the right not to. And to be able to invest your curiosity in the world around you, the wonderment in any one moment. You could pick up any item, a cough drop is fascinating, whatever that may be, to allow you to approach the presence of another person as a gift.
And every communication that we have with individuals, I do believe that every person that we meet has a story to tell, whether or not they want to share that story. And as you mentioned before, we don't have to talk if we don't want to and reveal things. And if at some point a topic becomes too much, we have the right to say, no, I'm not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like within the disability world, it's meant to be us as the disabled people that stay at our story and why we have a disability or what requirements we may have. But sometimes some people feel they have a right to know, and they will ask the questions when they're not really supposed to, because it's our story, it's down to us. And that can be a tricky one. I'm quite open, so anybody can ask me absolutely anything. But there's been so many times where people just think I've had an accident, and they'll go, oh, what have you done to your leg?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when you're getting it sorted, or they'll see me like 2 years later, oh, is your leg not better yet? And it's kind of like, no, guys, it's a lifelong disability. I'm kind of always going to be like this. And it's people's perceptions, but how people may phrase questions or ask can be quite intrusive to our lives. But then that touches upon like trauma, in that trauma can happen to anybody at any given time, and we don't actually realize that we may have experienced it. And I've listened to and watched a lot of Gabe Mate's stuff around childhood trauma, for example, and how he says sometimes stuff that you go through as a child could then be embedded into your life and shape how you become who you are today. So how can like listeners separate from that past trauma that affects their current perceptions?
Definitely. Well, first, I just want to address one thing. I studied narrative medicine, which is a field that was conceived as a way to teach empathy to physicians through reading literature, through identifying with characters. And in fact, my work is based on this idea of social justice. And one of the differences can be terminology. So, for example, you may say disability, other people may say differently abled. Mm-hmm. But that presumption that I can ask you something is so disrespectful. Mm-hmm. What we can ask is, how would you like to be referred to? Whether it's, Ms., Mrs., they, anything in that world, or whether it's, a difference that you may have. So I think that it's extremely important to, in your own awareness of yourself, stand back and be able to find a comfort within yourself to admit to yourself, this person seems different from me, rather than pretending like everything, oh, you'll be fine. What an insult, and you can't see my trauma. So we all have it. So in terms of how to deal with it from the standpoint of someone struggling with trauma, there's a lot of approaches. And the first thing is to invite yourself to be open with yourself. And that's sometimes done through journaling, or just, you can relax and close your eyes and just think deeply and sort of interview yourself. Mm-hmm. And this is a first step to finding routes to healing that feel right for you. Some people want to go to a therapist. Some people want to talk to a friend. Some people want to process things by themselves or with a group of people who are also dealing with the same kinds of trauma. But there is no one way. And anybody that tells us that there's one religion or one way to heal our trauma or anything else is just so limited in their worldview. There are a million ways to look at any one thing. And it is our right, and I think our imperative, to find the best way to understand and express ourselves to others.
No, I totally agree. And there is so many ways to assess a situation, as you say. I've got friends that absolutely adore CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, for those that may not know the acronym, and will swear by it. That never worked for me when I went through CBT. Some of my friends have gone through, I'd probably define it as group therapy, where you all come together and have a shared experience, because then you're with people that understand and can connect, even though the situation might be different to whilst you're there, like such as your trauma. It's that sense of connection still, and that somebody's going to understand. And as you say, some people prefer to journal, and that's the route in which I would go down, or like jars, where you can put your thoughts and your feelings. So if you're having a bit of an off day, you can pull out a compliment and be like, yay. It can just, like, it's like a pick you up. And as you say, having those people that you can sometimes talk to, or knowing that there's phone lines and so forth, and I suspect United America and around the rest of the world, they'll have groups and so forth that people can contact should they need to. And it's so important to know that not one box fits all, and that there are different approaches to different situations, and sometimes you've got to find the right one that works for you, and it might not be the first one, it might not be that second approach, but not to give up on that, and I guess to be open-minded to different possibilities.
I think that's really important. And, you know, as a psychotherapist, you're required to study all of these different modalities. And then at the end of the day, you may say, okay, I'm going to practice this way. Or as I do, I've sort of taken everything that resonates for me, and I have a particular way to focus, but it's different with every individual. The one thing I would really urge people, especially if you're somewhat isolated, is see if you can tap into a general understanding of many ways to process your pain and trauma. Because the more ways that you see, the more you're telling your unconscious there are options. There's not one way to do it. For instance, if I'm trying to lose weight, I'm not going to be able to stay on a diet like that. I know myself. So I have adapted ways to do it. And whether it's, you know, sort of gradually reaching out to other people, or just deciding I'm just not ready, I'm not comfortable. It's so important to honor your fear, but also to push yourself a little bit. So one of the reasons I love working with groups, and always have, is that as important and essential as one-on-one connections are, this is, you know, really beautiful. We're very focused on each other. But when you have a group of people who are all different, because everyone's all different, but even different life circumstances, different geography, all of that stuff, and you start talking about an idea, and you get to hear different people's thoughts and experiences around this idea, it opens you up in a way that you would not have discovered on your own. And that experience really can teach us not just not to judge a person, but that there are infinite possibilities in this world, regardless of what limitations may be real or perceived.
And sometimes, as we know, some people who might be disabled, or their caregivers and facilitators and those that may help out disabled people, there's places people can go for, such as to be able to recharge or go for respite. So disabled people could go off together and have a beautiful weekend away. Likewise, the caregivers and the facilitators can go off with others in a similar situation. How important is it to be doing these sort of things, taking that time out to be able to recharge and maybe reconnect in different ways? Like, what do you believe the importance of creative dreaming as both respite and a tool for reimagining life?
This I could talk about for the rest of my life. I call it Wonderland. And I have a thing that just evolved over the course of my life, where I will lay in my bed very comfortably with my arms supported, my legs supported, so that I am a floating body, liberated from any physical pain or worry. And in that state, I can either decide to focus on something specifically, or just wander into the infinite imagination that we are gifted with. And if all you had was this, You can go everywhere. You can invent anything. And, one of the things that I offer people are cards that have prompts on them based on our 12 core concepts, so that it can be an impetus, but you can find an interesting issue anyway. You can open a book to any page, find a word, and then just riff on that, or explore something online that's of interest. But I think the most important thing about a vacation, whether it's a mental vacation or a physical vacation, you cannot get the same quality of respite, of relaxation, of other focus when you're in your routine.
Mhm.
And I'm always surprised to see how quickly, you don't have to go 1,000 miles away. You don't have to go far at all. When you change your scenery, you get new ideas, and those new ideas and new perspectives lead to more.
I couldn't agree more. And people think I'm just nuts at some point. So the other week, my friend owns a caravan, and I just said to her, I was just like, "Can I rent your caravan for the weekend?" And everyone's like, "What? You're going on your own? Are you not going to be bored? What are you going to do?" And I'm just like, it's time away with my own thoughts and my own mind in a different space. And as people know, I'm quite a creative, and sometimes we can get things which is known as like a writer's block.
Mhm.
And you just sit there looking at the screen and fresh ideas are not coming to you. And you just want to be able to take yourself away from that space to reconnect with yourself, reconnect with life, and to come back recharged and re-empowered. And it's just so nice to be just disconnected from technology, even though I needed tech to get there, like maps, and to find my way once I was around, being able to explore something new in unfamiliar territories. And I guess it's like a fight or fright situation at points, because you've never been there before, you don't know what's around, you're actively thinking and stimulating your mind in ways which you've not been stimulating yourself for the past 2 years. Because for me, I've been working from home, it's wake up, get showered, come down, turn on a laptop, go in the kitchen, get food, work, back upstairs, get showered, go to bed, eat, sleep, repeat.
Yeah.
Is your mind hasn't really had much stimulation because you're doing the same job that you've been doing, you know how to do it. And to be trialed and tested and to be able to have self-improvement and to learn and to grow is what can really stimulate us, and that's really important.
And, there's another thing that I find extremely stimulating when you're traveling, whether it's in a car or a train or a bus or an airplane or walking. What happens is, regardless of what you're thinking about, you are constantly being visually and orally stimulated.
Mhm.
And in that stimulation, you automatically will get new ideas. So you're thinking about something, you see a building, or you hear a honk of a horn, things that are happening in the world around you. And from that is one of the reasons I believe that we get so many fresh ideas when we're in a new place. That stimulation is so essential to hope.
Mhm.
Because when we're in the same environment and things become routine, it's so easy to fall into depression, because your unconscious starts thinking there's nothing new. It's the same old, same old. And of course, that's never true. But when your experience is just repetition every day,
Mhm.
even if it means sitting somewhere else or watching a movie that will
Mhm.
take you into another world, whatever you can do to break your pattern is stimulating.
I couldn't agree more. It's so important. And it's like with the whole working from home, some days I would just take my laptop and go on the sofa and work from the sofa, because it's just that different kind of perception. When it was summer, I had to go into my garden just to get that freshness, because otherwise you're just cooped up. Where previously, if I was in an office, I'd be walking to my car, walking from the car garage into the office. At the break, you'd be going for laps around where you work. To be just then sat in your house and rarely going out, it's trying to push yourself all the time. It's like when my neighbour got a dog, everybody will know I love Joe the dog, who watches this. He's beautiful as a black Labrador. Is that gets me up, that gets me out, because at least twice a week, we'll take him for a walk around the park. I'll schedule it into my diary. I'll go for
Nice.
that walk because it's so important to get out and about. But before, you mentioned about the 12 concepts. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, sure. So the 12 core concepts, which I happen to have right over here, are based on my work over the years as a psychotherapist, but also my work as an individual trying to move beyond my own trauma. And these are basically tools. They are tools that were designed to help us live with what I call the cult of culture, which is the constant onslaught that tells us, among other things, that we're not good enough. And everyone gets that message, but we feel so shamed about it that we may not share that shame with other people. When you're in a group of people and someone mentions something that you have felt and you thought, this is why I'm crazy, then you start to realize, wait a minute, it's not me alone if some other people feel the same thing. So when we break this down and start to understand how advertising, institutions, parents, media, internet, most of all, social media, all of this stuff, how this has told us things about ourselves that we can't completely combat because we can't make it stop. But we have to use our awareness to put a halt to it. And part of that is, as you were saying earlier, unplugging. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we do is we talk about upgrading. So we think about something. So, when I was a child, my sister told me I was the ugly duckling. Well, when you're a kid, you just believe what people tell you. And so what happens eventually is you either confront the discrepancy between what you're told you are, what you feel you are, and what you aspire to be, and you move beyond it. And you can even use something like that, which in my case I wouldn't call trauma, but to empower yourself. And maybe for me, it empowered me, as we were saying earlier, that like, I'm going to present myself the way I want to. I'm going to wear the clothes I choose because I'm comfortable. And so working down, we have relational mindfulness as a way to do the absolute opposite of being told what you are or who's cool or who's good enough. Awe stands for awareness, wonder, and empathy. And if you approach your relationships with that, with the wonder and empathy for what other people's experiences are, you'll get to know them. Mm-hmm. And everyone loves someone who understands them. Nothing feels better. We need it to thrive. Mm-hmm. So then we talk about who you really are, separate from the things that have happened to you. And one of the ways, I won't go through every single thing, but one of the other things that I practice is something I call radical gratitude, which is every time there's a close call and you almost fall, almost drop a glass, almost press send, whatever it might be, take the time out to realize I'm so lucky. I just missed some sort of an accident. And if you do that constantly, you will have those experiences every single day. And again, speaking to your unconscious, who registers things that their conscious mind doesn't always do, you start to feel luckier, more fortunate, and more appreciative of your life. And that one practice makes a huge difference.
And those sort of practices are what can help improve your love life and relationships, not just with yourself, but with partners too. And especially as you've touched upon, like empathy, as you know, as we were discussing before the podcast recording today, is, in order to build a good relationship sometimes with people, not just with yourself, but with partners, is, you've got that physical attraction, you've got the emotional, you've got the intelligence, and you've got the spiritual, but part of it all is about the empathy and being able to understand where people are coming from and what's making people feel that way. And I often say to people as well, is asking somebody, how are you? Well, that's just generic chit chat. Do you really care? Do you care? Asking
Mhm.
somebody, how do you feel? You will get a
Mhm.
completely different answer. And
Mhm.
being able to
Mhm.
empathy and not judge somebody for what they say. We're all very quick to judge at points, but being able to take that step back and train ourselves to understand what's making somebody do what they do, why somebody's feeling how they are, can help build us as an individual as well.
I think the word train ourselves, I guess that's a phrase, is exactly right, because these habits are not built in. And unless we were to live in an isolated, smaller culture where each individual was really mentored to work through some of the things that children go through, like envy and jealousy and all of these kinds of things, which are normal, but are not always uh, invited to be expressed and worked through. We have to learn ourselves how to work this stuff through. But there's another piece of empathy, which is this: I can be right or I can love you. And it depends on the issues. Certain things push our buttons and we just don't want to give in. So, maybe at another time we might be willing to, maybe we never will. But just to have the awareness, I'm making this choice, as opposed to putting yourself aside and trying to hear it from the other's point of view without trying to make excuses for yourself. And perhaps, depending on what you're talking about, after the other person truly feels empathized with and heard, maybe it'll be your turn. But if the focus is always on the other and, sort of with an attitude like, I will be polite, I will go second, you will probably get far more from the other person than you do if you just start off
Mhm.
talking about your own needs.
Because then that also like builds into the trust part as well. If somebody else feels comfortable enough to be able to trust you, if they've
Yeah.
already got a brick wall up due to whatever situation they've gone through, if they give you a brick and you're to receive that brick, then that's them trusting you. But if you're to throw that brick back at them because you don't agree, or you're maybe verbal to them or confrontational, that brick's just going to go back on that wall, and then it's going to make it that little bit harder for them to bring it down in order to have that true, honest conversation with you about how they may feel. And we touched upon before about, we're not born with racism built into us. We're not born with ableist language built into us. It's learned behaviors as we've
Mhm.
grown up. Maybe if it's through friends, if it's through family, society, and so forth. And retraining how we think, act, and believe is what can make society a lot better to live in.
Absolutely. It's hard to understand sometimes why certain things are prioritized that really aren't just about money. For instance, some of the fast food that we are sold that has no nutrition, really. And then we get addicted to it. And then we just play out that kind of thing. But again, it's with awareness that you can say to yourself, I'm not going to get involved in this or that. And also, just to pick up on what you said, the person that extended themselves to give you a break could easily shut down because
Mhm.
they have vulnerability as well. And they took a risk to offer you a break. And so I just think it's so important to appreciate when things are hard for you, chances are they're hard for the other person too.
Mhm.
And that regardless of what you struggle with, you're not the only person who struggles. You deserve to appreciate and honor what you have before you, what challenges you have in your life on every level. But to also understand that because we are all people, the human condition is struggling. And the beauty and the respite are these moments where we connect and we feel like, oh my gosh, you understand me. And I understand you, to the extent that two people ever really can.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people want. I don't want to speak for the world, but I think a lot of people, they just want to be understood and have their
Mhm.
voices heard, and to have that sense of connection and that sense of belonging. I think ultimately that's, what we want, is to be understood by people.
How much violence would be abated if somebody would just listen to this person? Nobody acts like you were saying, people aren't born racist. People aren't born, judgmental. We are born with very knee-jerk reactions to differences. But as we grow, we can think more profoundly about such issues and understand the difference between danger and difference.
And thank you so much for all this amazing information today and speaking to us all at Love Life Disability. But where can people go to find out more information about the work that you've been doing, Shari?
Thank you. Well, if you go to thenarrativemethod.org, you will learn all about our programs and products and experiences. We have every single week 2 free Zoom-ins that are at times that hopefully people around the world can make. So 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Pacific time is, I guess, later in the day, somewhere around
5 p.m.
Yeah, so on Sunday mornings, we call it the Sunday Morning Write. It's only 1 hour. Everyone's invited, regardless of whether you're a professional writer or you've never picked up a pen. And it's extremely fun and it's a creative process. And then on Thursday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6:15, again, Pacific time, we do the Human Zoom-In, which is an experience of looking at interesting short videos and getting prompts as a result of that, and then going into breakout rooms and talking about whatever stories are evoked from these interesting things. So we've had people from all over the world, and the more differences, the more places and different perspectives that come, the more we are all enriched. So I really hope your listeners will join us.
Oh, I'm sure quite a few of them will do. We do have listeners from all over the world, and some of us don't sleep. We've got insomnia, so then the ones which are early morning, I'm sure would really benefit some of us as well. And as you've touched upon, having that lived experience and sharing things, especially when it's like culture and disability and from different backgrounds, can just enlighten people so much to have that, even if it's just that little glimpse into somebody else's life or what it could actually be like, in order to understand. So we don't need to judge and we can ask questions in a safe space.
Well, I'm just touching on that little shift. Little is the beginning of big. So one of our other concepts is the rocket ship. So imagine this, especially when you're mired in, I don't know what to do, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stuck. Imagine a rocket ship zooming into space at a zillion miles an hour, and it changes its trajectory by 1 degree, it's going to go somewhere else. Use that image for strength when you feel like, oh, I just don't have the energy. You're not going to go from A to Z in one day, and you can't anyway. So I will share one other thing that we offer to people, and you'll see this on the website. We've created a couple of decks of cards. Let's see if I have one here. Not really. That allow people to create their own groups. You can also use them one-on-one or as writing prompts. And the reason for these cards is that you don't need a license to use your humanity. You don't have to go to therapy. You can. I'm a therapist. I think it's extremely effective. But there's no one size fits all. So to have a tool that can allow you to be challenging yourself about some really deep, meaningful ideas is very helpful, and it will start getting you out of a rut.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I think, you know, what we've discussed today, there's been so many practical pieces of advice that people can use in order to look into mindfulness more and to take control of oneself and to bring us all to a place of happiness and to bring us to like fulfillment, and in order to like to connect with ourselves, but to other people as well, and really improve our relationships with ourselves and others. So thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into this new way of thinking.
You are so lovely. I'm thrilled to be here and to connect with you. And maybe you'll come to one of our salons. I would love to see you there. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.